It is Tuesday, October 4th, 2011. I'm Alex Jones, your host. This is Infowars Nightly News here at prisonplanet.tv and InfoWarsNews.com, the true cutting edge in the exploding alternative grassroots media that is supplanting the globalist Federal Reserve-funded corporate horror media of CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. Coming to you from Austin, Texas tonight, I'm Alex Jones, your host. We've got quite a transmission lined up for you. Nomi Prins, a Goldman Sachs insider who now 8 years ago predicted the derivatives implosion we're seeing, will be joining us for an in-depth video interview. Also, we've had Rob Jacobson on the ground in New York reporting to us on what exactly is really going on with Occupy Wall Street and who's behind it. And we're going to look at Hank Williams Jr. Hank Williams Jr., of course, has now been fired of being the intro entertainment for Monday Night Football for 20 years because he supposedly compared Obama to Hitler. But if you actually watch the 30 seconds of video, that's not really what he did at all. It's okay to bash one party or the other for the establishment, but they don't like it when you decry the entire system, and that's what Hank Williams Jr. did. We're going to be analyzing that coming up. The first thing I want to get to, though, is Rick Perry. Kurt Nimmo has an article breaking down the video that we're about to play. Rick Perry calls for sending U.S. troops to fight Mexico's drug cartels inside Mexico. We're not talking about troops on the border that's constitutional. No, we're talking about troops going into Mexico. This has happened several times in our history. It normally results with Mexico losing part of its geography, and we certainly don't want Mexico to be the 51st state. Let's go ahead and go to that clip.
That we were able to stop the drug cartels in Colombia was with a coordinated effort. It may require our military in Mexico working in concert with them to kill these drug cartels and to keep them off of our border and to destroy their networks.
I don't have words to describe how dangerous that is. Homeland Security for a long time has been wanting to invade Mexico. Let me break down something here for you, and this ties into Fast and Furious we're going to cover here in a moment. Celia Castillo, who was the top DEA agent in Latin America for more than a decade, former Border Patrol agent, you name it, in his own right. He told me 6 years ago on air, and those interviews are on YouTube, they're on prisonplanet.tv. He was part of Kevin Booth's American Drug War documentary that aired on Showtime and was award-winning. In fact, I brought Celly to town to be part of that documentary as a consultant. He worked with Gary Webb, the Pulitzer Prize winner, on CIA drug trafficking into the U.S. But even though Celly came off as credible, it was still hard to believe what he was telling me. And he said, well, Los Zetas works for the U.S. government. They've been trained at Fort Benning, Georgia. Years later, that did come out. And he said they've approached me, and the U.S. government and CIA have approached me to train them down by the King Ranch down in South Texas to wage a war in Mexico. And he said Calderon's going to get elected next year, and there's going to be a huge war down there, just like in Colombia, over the drugs, not to stop the drugs. And he said the ATF is shipping guns in. Now, there was no news about this, no court hearings, no nothing. Now, 2 years ago, Holder comes out and he gives a speech about Fast and Furious. That's why he's been caught in perjury. The guy's been public with it, saying we're tracking guns into Mexico. What they were actually doing was sending tens of thousands of guns, and one shipment alone, 2,000, to the Sinaloa drug cartel. And we've done 2 or 3 past broadcasts on this last month showing El Paso Times. In fact, that's probably even still on the computer from a few weeks ago if you want to show it. Or maybe later we can do a report on tomorrow night. The point is, the El Paso Times, Chicago Tribune, all reporting what's come out in federal court documents, the government's admitted it, that yes, for at least 5.5 years, the Sinaloa cartel, that's the biggest one on the Mexico-U.S. border, has been given full authorization to shift in unlimited cocaine by the tens of tons into the U.S., and the ATF ships them guns. Now, it's come out in more emails and more testimony in Congress that the White House knows, Holder knows, he lied and said he didn't know. But the Republicans, who are now, some of them calling for a special counsel to probe Holder on the Fast and Furious probe, that supposedly broke today on Fox News, they're not going to be able to dig too deep because this goes back to Bush. This is Iran-Contra Part 2. It's now come out that the U.S. government, ATF, FBI, DEA, other agencies, 7 in total, are shipping guns into Chicago, into Indianapolis, the drug route up north from Mexico, into Tampa. They're not just shipping guns into Mexico to the cartels that launder their money through big U.S. banks. They're shipping them all over the United States. I mean, this is so criminal. And they're talking about some big political thing where they'll make Holder resign and, oh, they screwed up and all this to get some political points. You're not going to fix this until you take it back to square one, to Vietnam and the Defense Department and the CIA bringing the drugs into this country that's been declassified and admitted. And it went on through the 80s. I'm going to probably have Ricky Ross on tomorrow, who ran the drugs for the CIA, what, 50 million a day or so in Southern California. He just got out of prison. We are deep into this, deep into covering it. And yes, risking our lives to connect these dots for you. But they're there publicly. So here's the LA Times. Emails show top Justice Department officials knew of ATF gun program and lied. ATF Fast and Furious. New documents show Attorney General Eric Holder was briefed in July 2010. He gave a speech, several speeches, in fact, one in Texas in 2009, bragging about Fast and Furious and how they were tracking guns. That was their cover. This is nothing but arming Los Zetas and others trained at Fort Benning, Georgia. It doesn't get any more obvious than this. It's open and shut. The mega banks that run America, the same ones that are butchering our economy, are working with the Mexican government to knock out the other cartels. And Perry says that we should send U.S. troops down there. There's different cells of different cartels in every police department, in every state police department in Mexico, in the military. There's 5 different cartels represented, and they're all fighting each other. And these people are about as violent and vicious and ready to die as anybody in the world. Our military is going to get completely chewed up. It's not like they're lining up and fighting Santa Ana or something. You know, this is guerrilla warfare. Over $500 billion a year coming out of Mexico into the U.S. And Rick Perry says, go down there and kill the cartels. You want truck bombs here in America? You want kidnappings? You want mass shootings? You want newspaper reporters being killed and hung from bridges every day? Let this drug war continue. Decriminalize all of this garbage. Decriminalize all of it, and it'll end overnight. Okay? But no, his answer is more war. Now, I know I spent a lot of time on this. It's going to be a two-hour show tonight if I don't shut up, but this is unbelievable. This is unbelievable. It's come out in federal court documents that they let 18-wheelers of pure cocaine drive through from Sinaloa right through these Border Patrol checkpoints 80, 90, 100 miles into Texas. There's scores of them. In fact, Rob, you had that map. It was like 15 of them in South Texas. I went through one of them Sunday. I showed you the video last night. They got drug dogs out. And I'm like, the government deals the drugs, man. You're not searching my car. Number one, I don't use your products. Number two, it's a Fourth Amendment. They said, well, don't videotape. I'll videotape if I want to. It's my First Amendment. You got cameras crammed down my throat. All right, I'm going to settle down. I've only gotten into one news story now. Good Lord. Let's go ahead and get into Honduras. Paul Watson reported last week on what even the New York Times admitted, but they said, oh, it's all right. It's for the earth. That in Uganda and other areas, the UN-sponsored World Bank groups are coming in and just slaughtering people en masse, burning down villages, shooting everybody that have been on the land for thousands of years to plant trees for carbon offsetting, because hippies, when they buy a gallon of gas, like to pay a carbon offset, even though it's voluntary, and they want to make it mandatory. And now it's been confirmed in the New American Magazine and other major publications that in just one village alone, they killed 23 farmers. They burn everything down. And it's all a UN program with the World Bank taking their land. I mean, it's just absolute genocide, and I just can't take it anymore. I told the story of in the 80s, we used to go down twice a year to Mexico, to Cancun for a couple days. Then my parents would drive me around with my sister, and we would see the pyramids and stuff. It's really beautiful down there. And my dad saw the brochures in the hotel, get Mexican land. And my dad's like, wow, Mexico's never allowed foreigners to own land. It's a sovereignty issue because they'd had Germans and others coming in trying to take over the country 100 years ago, Europeans. And my dad went and talked to the concierge of the hotel. He did some research. I remember him in the rented car driving around going, oh, this is a UN biosphere thing. This is when I was in high school. They're taking these farmers' property, sometimes at gunpoint, and then selling it to companies and others. But because it's under UN control, you're allowed to buy it, but just have one house on it, even if it's 100 acres, for the earth. And it's all these rich yuppies buying it. And then later he learned about the machete rebellions down there when the Yucatan Mayans rebelled against it. That's why there's 30 million people instead of 10 million now in Mexico City. That's why we got illegals crawling all over us who work for nothing, because the UN went in with the Mexican army and blew their heads off if they didn't leave their land. They're like, where's the deed to your property? Well, my family's been here for 10,000 years. I don't know. You know, 100 generations are buried up there on that hill. They're like, we don't care. You're not growing your corn here anymore. Get off. Some rich yuppie wants your land. This is the type of crap that's going on. But because it's cloaked in liberalism, I mean, I swear, if you painted a tank rainbow and had troops with Rasta hair, they could eat babies. And people would say, well, it's liberal. I mean, Al Gore, all of this. I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore. And under the carbon tax initiatives, UN even admits 1 billion people would starve to death in a decade if they put these carbon taxes on the third world. I was down in Mexico a year and a half ago in Cozumel, and I went out to rent a little glass bottom boat, like $50, for 2 hours, take my kids out and show them fish and stuff and snorkel. And I came out and I said, where are all the fishing boats? It was cool to pull up and see them, all the little fishermen catching fish. He said, the guy who could speak English, my wife could speak Spanish, she talked to him more, but he said in English, oh, they banned the fishing. So my wife talked to him in Spanish. And he said, yeah, for a couple of years now, no fishing allowed on the island and none on the mainland. Only the big commercial groups have given the government money and they pay them taxes. So now we're not allowed to fish. We have to go try to find another job. And man, the people 10 years ago, I go to Cozumel, beautiful place, happy people. They look like they've had their soul sucked out. This is a fishing island. People fishing for hundreds of years. They're not allowed to catch fish, because the multinationals come trawling, scooping it all up, but they pay the Mexican government money. The big fat cats, the El Jefes, that sit up on top of it, little chiefs. I mean, this is what America is going to be like with the animal ID, the premises ID, all of this. I mean, this is a lot of commentary tonight, and I haven't even scratched the surface. It's just incredible what globalism is. And it's time to realize that tyranny always comes in a new guise. It isn't going to look like Hitler this time or Stalin. It's going to look like that. And real people that are, liberals or into all this stuff, you need to understand that just because something has a rainbow painted on it doesn't mean it's good. I could paint cyanide pills with rainbows on them. Would you like to take them? I mean, really, you got to get past the packaging. Just because something says, it's got gold in it, you open it up, it can be horse crap. And basically, they're slaughtering people all over the place, but saying it's for the earth. That's like the World Wildlife Fund, whenever Prince Bernhard, the founder of it, the former Nazi, got caught running hunting operations under the guise of the World Wildlife Fund, defending animals out there getting their ivory in Africa. The British intelligence got caught using environmental preserves in Africa to launch takeovers of their indigenous governments. This is how these people operate. Stop being naive. Start looking into things. All right, I'm done. I'm done on that. It gets worse now. All the big Australian newspapers have reported on it. So has the Associated Press here in the United States. We told you years ago that Facebook tracks everywhere you go. It's 800 million users in real time. It's not just cookies. They have other tracking systems. They got caught last week and said, it's a mistake. We're sorry. Remember, the founder, Zuckerman, called you a bunch of dumb effers. He said, our customers trust us. They're a bunch of dumb effers. Well, the same top Australian technologist who discovered they were tracking everybody, we already knew it, but great, he just rediscovered it and did get this attention on it. Just like I told you that OnStar was tracking you 12 years ago. Now it's admitted, and Bill O'Reilly took credit this week. Great, I don't care who takes credit. The same technologist who discovered this went and dug up the patent You can find this on all these companies. Google put out a patent 6 years ago we covered. And the patent, show you a document cam shot of this, says that they track everything you do in real time once you come to the site and you leave it. And again, I'll show viewers a document cam shot of this. U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, it's patent number 20110231240. And of course, there's a patent number and a press release put out by Google in 2005 admitting they're listening to you with the onboard microphone on your computer, and that a computer is logging everything you say and then putting it into a psychological algorithm package. They even say if a dog barks in the background, they'll then have dog food ads pop up. And I told people this 6 years ago, even though we had the press release and the patent on Google, and people didn't want to believe it. This because, oh, it's impossible. That's Big Brother. Now they just throw it in your face. So there is the patent. We also have the Sydney Morning Herald breaking all of that down. So I thought that we would just go over that for you this evening. Next little tidbit. Today, I was looking at drudgereport.com, and I saw an article that had just come out of CBS News that Starbucks wants to help you. They're going to pressure, in trendy pressure, just like the other stores say, hey, you want to give money to this charity or that charity, and it turns out the store's keeping generally about 75% of the money. Just like United Way got caught keeping, along with Red Cross, billions of dollars, it was several billion, of 9/11 first responder donations and giving it to gun control groups, anti-family groups. As soon as I saw the name of this group, I called Paul Watson and I said, I remember seeing this group connected to trying to get Obama elected, to socialism, to gun control. And because they said, we're not just going to have you give $5 and then these development banks loan it at interest. You got to love that. To people locally. It also said they help community groups. And turns out it's connected to Starbucks in 2008, saying they were going to donate part of every purchase to Obama and his campaign. That's how the article ends. The company also offered free coffee to those who offered to pledge their allegiance to Obama's creepy National Civilian Security Force proposal, with the kids in red uniforms dancing around like going, huh, we're taking over, huh, I'm fierce, socialism. And so now when the trendies go in, they'll have the trendy behind the counter go, you got your tall, which is a small, want to give $5 to help small business? How about you cut taxes? How about you cut taxes? Seriously. They're in there laughing, making me laugh. No, it's sad, actually. Sure, I'll do one for people. It's trendy. Would you like to give $5 for small businesses, give them jobs? And if you're like, no, I just want whatever you're putting in this coffee that's so creepy. I'm like, oh, you're not trendy. All right, there you go. I'm sorry. All right, it's not that funny. It's actually sad. And then you give the money, and they're going to give it to gun-grabbing groups and national service groups with youth in red jackets and khaki pants going, brigade, force, socialism, get your guns. I mean, this is how you're going to get jobs? How about, it's not funny, dude. How about we cut taxes on small businesses? How about we enforce the federal law that most of these federal contracts are supposed to be given to small businesses, and they're not. It turned out they're all blacked out, and foreign companies get it. There's a blacklist. I mean, how about we do that? No, you've got to be lectured by a trendy to give money so they can give it to a gun grabber. So there you go, and let me tell you, it's going to be a huge success. The trendies will be like, oh, sure, God, oh, my God, ooh, liberal, ooh. I mean, it's just, it's true, dude. All right. Got his Christian Science Monitor. Starbucks to customers, donate $5, create jobs. I mean, why don't you just go give a small business $5? This is the biggest load of horse crap I have ever seen in my life. I mean, Starbucks ruining all these local communities, coming in, selling their overpriced, trendy crap, and now they're going to lecture you and demand $5 to give it to Sovietization groups. I tell you, Wall Street's behind the communist and socialist folks. They love taking the money through government, paying it corporate welfare to themselves. That's it. I've told people at the office, and they really do it, don't buy Starbucks coffee and bring it in. I've told family, please don't buy it. Yeah, it's strong. It'll wake you up. It'll wake the dead up and then make you wish you were dead a couple hours later. But I'm here to tell you, no more Starbucks. I'm boycotting you, the NFL, all of it. I've had enough. Now, let's continue here. And the TSA. You're like Big Brother giving me stuff to say in there. Dude's the master controller. He's actually Colonel Ziegler. All right, and the Vatican assassin commander. All right, continuing. All right, now I'm screwing around too much. Let's get serious here. Guys, stop it. ESPN. No, first I got to get to Gibson Wood. Oh, yeah, here it is. Gibson, the feds have now demanded they hand over the rest of their wood, even though India admits it was legally bought and is not in short supply or endangered. But they don't care if polar bears have gone from 10,000 to 50,000. They say they're endangered as they, invade Canada. That's the same thing here. They just want to harass an American-made company that's non-union, and that's the end of it. So feds demand 25 more bundles of Indian wood from Gibson Guitars. We're going to get the CEO back on the show here. Now, let's get to our next little tidbit here. Speaking of guitars, it's Hank Williams Jr., everybody's favorite hillbilly. And I guess the country boy can't survive when he went on Fox and Friends a few days ago, and the media said that he called Obama Hitler. So I watched the whole thing, and Rob watched it, and I said, what do you think, Rob? And Rob said, no, he was saying the whole government stinks. He said, I don't like any of the Republicans. He was asked, he said, I won't vote for any of them in the full clip. He said, 89% of Americans in USA Today want to abolish Congress. Well, how about abolish the crooks that are in there? I've seen polls of 91%. Only 9% actually approve of Congress. So it's worse than Hank's saying. And he says that it should be polar opposites, Netanyahu and Hitler, in his view, to have the Republicans and Democrats meeting. He doesn't like the socialist health care takeover that's admittedly bankrupting people and increasing health care prices. And for stating his political views, he's fired from 20 years of introducing Monday Night Football. And again, the real reason was not going after Obama, but going after the whole system and saying people are fed up and angry. They want to send a chilling effect. You get up and speak out against the government, you're going to lose your job, whether it's the Dixie Chicks against war or a good old boy that doesn't like the Congress and doesn't like Obama. The message is you sit down and shut up or you're going to lose your job. And I don't like the fact that Hank Williams III came out and said his dad wasn't smart enough. In fact, let me give you the exact quote here. I've got it here in my stack somewhere. He came out and said, my dad should not talk politics. He told CMZ, he said, most musicians are not worthy. Everybody's worthy of speaking out and saying what they believe. He said only Jello Biafra is Pope powerful enough to be able for us to speak. So, I think you should stick up for your daddy, Hank III. You look just like your granddaddy and got some good music. I think you guys ought to get back together and stop fighting with each other. And you should be friends with Shooter as well. But that's all a side issue. Little inside baseball. The point is, let's go to the heresy, the blasphemy of Hank Williams Jr. This is the rest of the story. He said the whole political system's shot. That's what he's being punished for.
An easy question. Who do you like in the GOP race?
Nobody. You remember the golf game they had, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah.
Remember the golf game?
Boehner.
That was one of the biggest political mistakes ever.
Why?
It'd be like Hitler playing golf with Netanyahu, okay?
Okay.
Not hardly. Look at USA Today poll. 89% said Congress should be completely replaced. Mm-hmm. I agree with them. The health care bill left, it's not going to fly either.
So he doesn't like any of the Republicans, and he said even more. You can watch the whole interview on YouTube. He said 89% of Americans say replace everybody in Congress. So I guess he actually got that right. My memory was he was saying abolish Congress. And he went on to say that these two people should be polar opposites and not like each other. We're not supposed to have the political process where it's two parties acting in concert like two wings on the same bird. No teleprompter, folks, so there's going to be little foibles and mistakes. Now, I want to go to this very informative and interesting man on the street interview that Darren McBreen did down at the city council with some people. And then he's going to be down there Thursday covering the Occupy Wall Street events in Austin. I'm going to be in Dallas Friday night, Saturday in Houston, Sunday in San Antonio for our Occupy the Federal Reserve. And Rob Jacobson, our reporter, has been sent to New York. We got correspondents everywhere, thanks to your support, up there covering really the epicenter of this. But we're really trying to gauge who the Occupy Wall Street people really are versus who the media says they are. Because the media says they're our saviors, the communists, who want to redistribute the wealth to offshore bankers with a tax on the middle class. And we talked to people in New York. Jacobson's got the interviews where they're like, I don't care about the $27 trillion of the Federal Reserve. I want to raise taxes on people making, $200,000, $300,000. Yes, that will fix it. So it's more a class envy, class warfare situation. A lot of folks don't understand that when you knock out the middle class, people don't have money to come buy your goods and services, and then you don't get into the middle class. You like burn the ladder that leads upwards or blow the bridge that takes you to the greener pastures. But the bankers know how to manipulate. That's why they're trying this. So there's a fight over the heart and soul over where this rebellion against Wall Street is going. We got neocons trying to run it on the Republican Party. We've got the Democrats trying to take it over with George Soros, MoveOn.org. With more on that, we're joined by Darren McBreen.
Thanks, Alex. The leftist Democratic Party front, MoveOn.org, is set to hijack the Occupy Wall Street protests this week, which is pretty ironic given the fact that the Obama administration is a creature of Wall Street itself. Now, we're standing here in front of City Hall in Austin, Texas, just days before the Occupy Austin protest are set to take place. We wanted to get the public's opinion on this protest movement and see who they feel is behind it all.
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, we don't have a whole lot of demonstrations happening in the United States, as far as I know, and this one seems to be a pretty big one. So it's nice to see people coming together and fighting for something they believe in.
It's people who are upset with the financial situation, with the bank bailouts, with the lack of repercussions.
I think the bankers are getting way too greedy.
People talking about freedom, ending the Federal Reserve, talking about the crimes committed by Ben Bernanke and other people in the high echelons of our government.
Not sure what their objective or goal is, except I've heard they're against corporate greed. Well, so is everybody. So what is the point, really? I don't understand.
I think it's very significant. I think we as a people have to pay attention to movements like this, because what it says is that folks are feeling disenfranchised and they're feeling like their government and their leaders aren't representing them.
Where do you think Obama stands on the Occupy Wall Street protest?
Well, that's interesting. One of the things I was trying to find myself this morning was whether or not I could figure out who was behind this. Yeah. And my first thought was the Democratic Party. I'm a Democrat. And I support Obama, but I was just curious as to what, generally what's going on.
Obama is a corporate puppet. He opposes the people. He is for arresting and pepper spraying all these protesters you see in New York that are unlawfully being detained and arrested.
I mean, in terms of whether he supports Wall Street, I mean, it's hard not to when you're the president, because they're kind of the place where all that, all the funding is coming from.
His heart is probably in the right place, and he would like to do what he says he wants to do and raise taxes on some of the higher earners. But at the same time, realistically speaking, there are people who donate to his campaign who are part of that demographic. So it's probably a lot more complicated than most of us are willing to admit it is for him.
Obama stands for the corporate interest. He's not on our side. He's a pay-to-play figure, as we saw with his Blagojevich scandal. So he's enabled Ben Bernanke and the Federal Reserve. We need to unelect Obama and abolish the Federal Reserve.
Just the same thing that the Bush administration and the Clinton administration and then the Bush administration did before that. It's just like a big revolving door. All those guys that work for the big banks, whatever party they're affiliated with, they're circled into the White House and into the government, and then after that term for that president is up, those people go back to working for the banks. They're just like a big circle.
Some of us feel that MoveOn.org and those kind of organizations might be attempting to kind of divert the attention to Wall Street and away from the Federal Reserve, who many people feel is more responsible for this whole economic situation. What are your thoughts on that?
I could certainly see that being a possibility. I think there's responsibility to bear all the way around. The folks that control Wall Street are some of the most influential folks in terms of the federal government, and vice versa. The federal government is probably the most influential force in terms of what happens at Wall Street. I think you can apply equal pressure all the way around. The bottom line is things have to change.
I mean, I'm not a big fan, personally, of MoveOn.org and the things they support, but I will say, You know, we got to have a big tent, welcome anyone that's protesting with us, but at the same time, you know, a lot of this will be co-opted. You're right. We look at the Tea Party, what's happened with the Koch brothers and the mainstream press really diluting that movement entirely by corporate power. So yeah, that is something we need to watch out for. It's a great point.
You want this to be exactly what it was established. Occupy Austin, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy any city USA is really about a general movement to stand up and be heard and to say that you are not going to be trampled by your government, by big business.
Recently, Alex Jones announced the campaign to occupy the Fed in a bid to focus the Occupy Wall Street movement on the real enemies of the American people, the Federal Reserve, and not let the protests be manipulated by Democratic Party front groups who are a huge part of the Wall Street establishment. I'm Darren McBreen for Infowars Nightly News.
Wow, that was a powerful report. And I liked what Martinez was saying, Leffing well, of course, is playing dumb as usual. But overall, a really good report, and those are great informed people on the street. And listen, there's protests going on all the time. We've had hundreds of In the Fed protests, sometimes with thousands of people at them, all over the country. Different groups have, Ron Paul and others. There's constantly protests at Wall Street. I promoted one of the Federal Reserve just a month or two ago that a couple hundred people showed up at in New York because a listener called me on air and said, will you promote this? So 2.5 weeks ago or so, I'd hear Occupy Wall Street. Yeah, okay, I hear this all the time. And then I kind of saw some MoveOn.org people involved, like, that's just some spin thing where they want to take it over. But now it's really gained steam. And so I was thinking kind of earlier in the week, okay, this is a big deal. The media is calling this the revolution. And everybody I see is Michael Moore saying capitalism's the problem, raise taxes, knowing that's going to be paid to the foreign banks who are promoting it, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, others. And so who the news was putting on, Roseanne Barr and others were calling for re-education camps and arresting everybody who has money. And I was like, God, this is authoritarian. Communists killed more people than Hitler, by a lot. I mean, this is a dangerous group, always led by useful idiots. I thought this must just be totally run. Now I've had reporters, Matthew Medina in San Antonio, I've known for years, great source, Rob Jacobson in New York, Luke Radowski in New York and D.C., In the Fed, people we talked to in Austin, Dallas, all over the country. We've sent our reporters down there, and quite frankly, a lot of them are our listeners. They're Ron Paul supporters, they're libertarians, they're liberals that have woken up to the real paradigm, they're conservatives that have woken up to the real paradigm of the New World Order, the private Federal Reserve. And I've got to say, the vast majority are not Soros-run or Al Gore-run or whatever, but the mainstream media is going and saying it's MoveOn.org. On the left, posing like they're saviors and run it. Then the right comes in and says, oh, the whole movement's a bunch of MoveOn.org, which isn't true. So again, it's that left-right thing. So yes, the mainstream media, the dominant media, not dominant for too long, they're collapsing. That's why they're flopping around and writhing. They're trying to misbrand it as Soviet or communistic when it's not. And Rob Dew brought to my attention, we linked to this on Infowars.com today, this Small Story Visuals is a group, they're shooting videos on their YouTube channel, they're excellent. Small 1124 is their YouTube site. And this is the same stuff that Rob Jacobson's shooting and putting on our YouTube channel. Very similar responses by the people. And Rob told me today, he walked up and there's a guy standing in front of a group of like 500 people going, where's Alex Jones? He needs to be here. And are you with Soros? Are you with Soros? And they're like, no. But then Jacobson did find some that were, but they were the minority. So what's happening here is this is real. This is grassroots. But now the Democratic Party and others have admitted they want to hijack it, just like the Republicans with the Tea Party. So here is 7 or so minutes of somebody who really knows what they're talking about. Then we're going to come back from break with Nomi Prins. Stay with us.
When you have big state government, small federal government, our voices are heard at the local level. We can make differences. A whole continent-wide cannot control a federal government with a banking system that prints money like it's paper. You can't even call it money anymore. Gold is money. Silver is money. Green dollars are not money. They're using inflation as a hidden tax to f*** the people. prices go up, do your wages go up? No. My wages didn't go up, but prices went up. Gas goes up, milk goes up, trains go up. How am I supposed to live? And this is all because our government prints too much money, starts too much wars, so they can sell their tanks, their guns, their missiles, because that's all America exports. It's guns, missiles, and tanks. That's it. We need to bring production back to America. And the Federal Reserve. And the fractional banking system. When you invest $100 in a bank, they multiply that by 9 and they send it out 9 different ways. They don't just make money on the initial investment, they make it 9 times the initial investment. That's fake money that they printed out of thin air. Fiat money. It's a fiat currency. Ones and zeros. 1913, this country died when we adopted the central bank and we got rid of sound money. We used to be able in 1913 to walk into a bank and redeem our dollars with gold. Can we do that anymore? No. What's the price of gold now? Almost $2,000. It's gone up $600 an ounce this year. It's going to keep rising. And it's going to keep rising as long as we have bailouts, as long as we have quantitative easing, as long as our government keeps spending our money. Every dollar the government takes in federal taxation is another dollar that they spend. Every time they spend money, that's your money that they send overseas. They bail out Morgan Stanley and then Goldman Sachs. When I fuck up, who bails me out? No one. Why should Goldman Sachs get bailed out? $700 billion in 08. And they want more now? They want more. That wasn't enough? You're going to drain. There's not going to be a middle class in 10 years. And the Federal Reserve. And the fractional banking system. And the Fed. Elect Ron Paul. And the war. Ron Paul 2012. Sound money. Stop with the banksters printing money. Printing it, debasing our currencies. Driving up our prices. We don't need any more money in our economy. We got plenty in debt. No. And the Fed. And the fractional reserve system. And the wars. Get corporations out of our politics. Out of our politics.
And corporate personhood.
Wall Street is rigged. When Wall Street owns a majority of the wealth and they invest in Wall Street, they know when the market's going to go up, they know when the market's going to go down, and they all make money while we all lose money. How is that fair? And then after thousands, trillions of derivatives, they want bailouts. They have the balls to ask us for bailouts. No more bailouts. No more printing of money. No more quantitative easing. And the Federal Reserve. And the fractional banking system. Sound money. Go back to a gold standard. The Depression will be nothing compared to 1913 when it hits us. 1930, when the Depression came, will be nothing like it will be in the coming years. If we lose America, we have nowhere else to run for freedom. There is no country left that promotes free markets, corporations, not in politics. There's no country that has their own sound currency. There is nowhere left to run. If we lose America, we lose the world to the elite. The 1% will continue to get rich as we all live like slaves. If you think the way of life is bad now, you will all be living in projects like Hoovervilles. We cannot continue to print money. We cannot continue to debase our currency. We need to end the Federal Reserve. We need to get lobbyists, Goldman Sachs, George Soros, Merrill Lynch, everyone out of our politics. Why should they be allowed to throw millions at politicians so they do what we want? They're supposed to be our voice, not their voice. States' rights. When you minimize government, it is easier to control by the people. States' rights. You need to give the rights back to the states. Minimize these government agencies like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loaned out money that private bankers would not loan out. People that they did not trust in, the government loaned money.
Well, that is what the establishment is scared of. And, he talks about elect Ron Paul president. You do hear a big cheer. But it's thousands of people just milling around, screaming their voices out, because you're not allowed to have bullhorns, even though I've had them in New York, been arrested. And I'm going to be up there in Dallas this Friday, occupying the Federal Reserve. You want to really send a political shot heard around the world? Come to the Dallas Fed. I'm going to be there for 2 hours. I'm going to ride to the next Fed like Paul Revere, but I need you to stay there, to occupy it for a few days, then others will come. Get the word out, folks. We need your help. This is history happening right now. We're going to go to break and come back with a Nomi Prins interview, and then at the end I'm going to break down really what's coming up with our Occupy the Fed movement. This is so important. And obviously, we'll take this prisonplanet.tv live transmission. It's going to re-air, be archived at prisonplanet.tv for subscribers. But obviously, we're going to take this and put it on the YouTube channel while we still have it. Behind the scenes, they're trying to take it down right now and threatening us and stuff. And get this video when it's on YouTube and get it out to everybody you know. But that idea, the things that that man was talking about there, that's what scares the system. When you talk about mega corporations teaming up with government, that's what Republicans won't talk about that. Democrats won't talk about that. That's the big dirty secret that's hiding in plain view. But the facts are getting out. We'll be right back.
Obama is notoriously a liar.
We need to go to where the real architecture of government is, and it's not in a president.
Wall Street has hijacked Washington in broad daylight.
Well, Obama's already fudging. He's fudged since day one in this election.
The elite are using Obama to pacify the public so they can usher in the North American Union by stealth, launch a new Cold War, and continue the occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan.
The globalists are outside all the nations. That gives them safety, and they play countries off against each other.
We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
Partnership and cooperation among nations is not a choice. It is the only way.
What they're doing is using the existence of the United States to act out their Wall Street fantasies of world domination and maintaining their capital structures and maintaining their system of looting.
The fight that this country has been waging since its inception is for the central bankers not to take over the country.
President Barack Obama is only the tool of a larger agenda.
Senator Obama had a desire to do some meetings. Others had a desire to meet with him tonight in a private way, and that's what we're doing.
Presidential candidate Barack Obama was publicly criticizing the North American Free Trade Agreement in a bid for votes, but privately telling Canadian officials not to worry about it.
If you talk to our generals, they are desperate for is a civilian counterpart to our military force.
What do you call this thing where you get this false sense of gratification, but because a black man is in office, everything's gonna be all right? No, everything's not gonna be all right.
So I know how unpopular it is to be seen as helping banks right now, especially when everyone is suffering in part from their bad decisions. I promise you, I get it.
The Obama deception. The truth strikes back. Get your copy of the Obama Deception today at Infowars.com or download it in super high quality at prisonplanet.tv.
Welcome back to Infowars Nightly News on this October 3rd, 2011, Tuesday edition. And we're going to close out this transmission with a closer look at the unfolding global financial meltdown. Bernanke saying we're on the verge of a new downturn. We never left the recession. We've been in a depression, according to the dozens of respected economists and financial experts that I've interviewed over the years. And Nomi Prins, of course, was the managing director at Goldman Sachs. She also worked with other big companies in large global strategic outlooks. So she was able to boil down the wide global image. And she's been talking about on our show for the last few years, but a lot longer before that in her best-selling nonfiction books about these robber barons and this system they've set up. So I wanted to get her on to talk about the deepening crisis and the world meltdown, and also wanted to get her view on Occupy Wall Street. Nomi Prins, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Well, where do you want to start? Because, I mean, here it is. It's only getting worse. Let's get into the global financial crisis and where you see it going, and then let's talk about the Occupy Wall Street and your new book.
Well, first of all, you know, as you just mentioned, and as we've talked about tons of times in the past on your show, and I have in other places, we're not going into a second dip. This is not an additional weakening. This is part of the same unfolding of the depression in which we find ourselves, and it is a second depression. It is for many, many reasons as bad as Great Depression 1. They're slightly altered, but they're very similar in that there was a group of bankers that emanated from Wall Street and diffused into the global economy that basically concocted a pyramid of risk, of speculation, of derivatives, of toxic assets, pick your poison, and proliferated the world with this risk. And when it became known and apparent that what was inside of these assets, these securities that were used also as chips on the betting table to purchase more and to inflate this whole toxic asset bubble globally more, everything fell apart, and it's still falling apart. And what the bankers, what Wall Street have not done and have not been forced to do in all of this, not forced by Congress on any party, not forced by the Fed, not forced by the Treasury Department, is to actually show that hand, to say, you know, this is what we created, to be held accountable for the fraud and the criminality involved, for the larceny that it took from the rest of the world, and the fact that these problems still exist. These assets are still in the world. There is still borrowed money that these banks have used to bet on other things with these assets as chips. It continues to move on, and that's why we're in a second Great Depression. There's no real money left to be used productively to create jobs, to create an infrastructure on the bottom level of the economy that works for most of the population. So instead we have all of these continued practices going unabated. We have the Federal Reserve, we have the central banks in Europe, the ECB, we have the IMF, everyone throwing money at these banks, at the investors that were involved in these securities and these assets and these derivatives and this leverage throughout the world, rather than trying to fix the problem, which is closing it down, figuring out where the risk was, getting rid of it, shutting down the institutions that need to be shut down, and not continuing to print money to continue to make this thing work further into the depression. And that just hasn't happened yet. And that's why we are not at a point where we're turning around. We haven't turned around. We're continuing to go into this economic rabbit hole, this dark hole, and it isn't changing yet.
Nomi, I'm seeing George Soros, I'm seeing Democratic Party operatives, MoveOn.org, admitting that they basically, from day one, have been trying to take over the Occupy Wall Street movement. But now the idea of Wall Street being corrupt and the trillions missing and not knowing where the bailout money went, that's caught fire across the country. And we've got reporters all over the U.S. We've sent reporters to New York and other areas. The demonstrators themselves are pretty savvy and awake, but the mainstream media is giving attention to mainly Democratic Party operatives, who, again, are just part of the same crew as the Republicans. And they're saying what we want is higher taxes on the rich, and Warren Buffett's promoting that, but he's basically exempt from the taxes. What they want is more taxpayer money, VAT, sales tax, increased income tax, to pay that in austerity money to the banksters and for new bailouts, as we see happening in Europe. So I see that as the big danger here. That's why I've called for nationwide demonstrations kicking off this Friday to occupy Federal Reserve locations, not just say capitalism, free market, Wall Street's evil. Michael Moore says communism's the way to go. Capitalism's bad. Roseanne Barr says cut people's heads off. Re-education camps. I mean, they're selling communism, another form of tyranny, as a solution for this crony capitalism or crony monopoly, this this monopoly man type system. I mean, A, do you agree with what I've just said? And B, can you elaborate on it?
Well, that's the issue with all of these isms, you know, whether they're coming from Republicans, whether they're coming from Democrats. You know, first of all, both of these parties and both of their leaders, President Bush, President Obama, it doesn't matter. For one thing, they equally supported and appointed Ben Bernanke, who's the current Federal Reserve leader. So there's no...
They got rid of Glass-Steagall. They allowed the derivatives.
Exactly. And what they allowed, and all of that, and let's not forget, the Federal Reserve is supposed to be the regulatory body in this country that is supposed to monitor the banking system. And instead of monitoring the banking system when it was creating all this risk, when it was diffusing all of these derivatives throughout the country, throughout people's pensions here, small towns in Iceland, in Greece, and Norway, basically wrecking the world, right? Instead of containing that, instead of breaking up the banks, instead of saying, you know what, this is bad for the overall economy. You are going to basically screw things up, and we will be taking the fallout for years and years and years to come. So I absolutely agree with you, Alex, that the Federal Reserve, the ECB in Europe, that basically they are a part of why Wall Street has been able to do what it did. They're the fuel on the fire. They're the feeding mechanism. Without the Fed printing money, subsidizing the risk, guaranteeing big banks to become bigger. For example, J.P. Morgan Chase, when it bought Bear Stearns in March of 2008, they didn't buy that. They basically had the government, us, back the risk. That risk of the defaults of the assets that it bought from Bear Stearns when it became a bigger bank by sucking it into its mechanism were backed by the Federal Reserve, therefore, and the Treasury Department and us. That's not a healthy way to run an economy. They're tremendously at fault, and it is something that needs to be adopted into the message, because without the mechanism for printing money for subsidizing risk that hurts the rest of the population, this mechanism wouldn't be able to have gotten as big as it got,
sure.
and it wouldn't be maintaining itself right now under the premise, under the illusion that somehow there's, for example, in the United States, the banks are somehow healthier, which they are not. They are insolvent. They are made to appear healthy by the fact that they're not marking their books correctly. They don't have to, and they're being subsidized and funneled with cheap money and guarantees and loans and other kinds of subsidies from the Federal Reserve.
Well, Nomi, I want to go back to the question, though, because I totally agree with you. Federal Reserve, European Central Bank, all part of the same consortium of these big six mega banks who created the tens of trillions in derivatives. Now they infect everything and hold the whole financial system hostage, saying, give us more power or we'll destroy everything. Clearly, there's a method to the madness where they create Ponzi schemes so big that instead of going to jail like Ponzi or Bernie Madoff, they get the world. So clearly this is premeditated, and now they're announcing this Bank of the World and austerity. I was just getting you to speak to Obama being Wall Street finance, just like the Republican leadership, but having the gall, Republicans, mainline, just say Wall Street can do no wrong, give them banker bailouts, that's conservative, but welfare moms are evil. They're hypocritical, it's obvious, it's silly. But with Democrats, they're coming out saying capitalism's the problem, when it has nothing to do with it, that government teamed up with mega banks and tied taxpayer money to it. I mean, that's nothing but an insider monopoly scam. I was wanting to get your take just on this spectacle of Michael Moore and all these people lecturing us, saying capitalism doesn't work, and then demonizing the entire private property system because a group of monopolists teamed up with government to screw us.
Well, I mean, that's saying that this isn't what classical capitalism was defined to be. This isn't everybody has an equal opportunity to get ahead and to create a business and to produce and to have a job and to create a job and all of that. That's not what happened here. Well, you're right. What happened here was a completely lopsided way of funneling money into the wrong risks that had the knock-on effect of creating a decimated global economy and a depressed economy. This isn't classical capitalism. So sort of moaning on just capitalism, and I think capitalism can work if it's a progressive kind of capitalism where there actually is a fairness to this, where banks that have to fail, where people can get the right amount of money for jobs that actually exist in order to feed their families.
Yeah, you don't give $16 trillion in bailout money to banks and then they hoard it and use it to not loan and shut down their whole service sector. I mean, it's incredible. We need to get back to free credit, basically, government issued. That's the American system, pre-1913 Federal Reserve. And then if people want to loan their private money, that's another issue. But to watch tens of trillions of dollars just given to these people and then they hoard it is incredible. Now, going back 7, 8 years ago, you're a big managing director. You're moving up the ladder to, the top of Goldman Sachs. And you quit, you leave, you start writing best-selling books like It Takes a Pillage, Other People's Money, Jacked, and other books. You started writing for The Nation, for Alternate, for Fortune, Mother Jones, BBC, CNBC, MSNBC, CNN, PBS. You start coming out against them. And I remember seeing videos of you 5, 6 years ago when the financial crisis hadn't happened yet. This wasn't on the radar. You were warning. So I want to go back to square one before we bring it to the future and where you see the world going. What did you see inside Goldman Sachs and inside, the highest levels of the global financial ruling class? What did you see that made you get out of there?
Well, I saw, and I left right after Enron and WorldCom and the last spate of frauds that we all remember. And what I saw was a tremendous amount of manipulation and lying. I had a boss who is now one of the senior, boss's boss, who basically ran the credit division at the time, which was, where credit derivatives were kind of spawned and born, and that business obviously grew out of control over the many years since, who would basically boast about his trips to Washington. We can't have this meeting because I'm going to be in Washington. And why they were in Washington was to basically collude the SEC and other members in Washington so that they would allow Goldman Sachs and also other investment banks to have more leverage, to basically be able to borrow against crappy securities and assets and book positions in order to make something of them that they weren't, so they could compete with the likes of JP Morgan Chase and Citigroup that had all these people's deposits and people's loans, and because of Glass-Steagall repeal were bigger mega banks, and they wanted to basically compete. So what happened was there was this beginning of a real race to do that, and I was looking at tremendously bad deals. I mean, this was around the time this even before Enron became known to the world per se as being fraudulent. But the energy companies, the broadband companies, the communication companies, what the banks were just doing with each other in terms of buying and selling packages of really faulty loans so they could take get a capital sort of check mark on their books from the Fed and basically not have to hold as much money behind their risk. That was all starting to really heat up around then, and I really saw that was not going to end well. And the first book I wrote, actually the very first piece I wrote was for Fortune, but it spawned other people's money, was that these banks together are creating a massive problem, and Washington is letting them. The derivatives market at the time for credit and CDOs, which are now these part of the toxic asset pyramid, were babies at the time. They're literal babies, and I was looking at these positions growing, and the first thing I wrote in the first chapter of Other People's Money was you got to watch this credit derivatives department. It is not transparent. It is a disaster waiting to happen. So are CDOs and everything else. So I think part of it, and I had no idea that this would grow into such a catastrophe because the amounts were so much smaller then, and it was let loose for so long. The risk, the toxicity of all of it has grown so much over the years since that it became a much bigger problem globally for everyone. But again, all of that was I'm not going to say beginning when I left. I mean, it was beginning before I left, but it was really coming to its sort of first head point. And given all of that, I just what was being done inside was wrong, and what was going to happen later was going to be a disaster. And I felt the need to sort of leave, and I couldn't stop talking or writing about it. I still can't, because I think it's really important.
Well, it certainly is. It's threatening our entire civilization, everybody's savings, our currencies, our economies, as everything is fed into this fraud in an attempt to prop it up. And I've interviewed so many economists, but you were inside of it. I want to get your take on this and then ask, where is it all headed? But every economist I talk to explains we're talking about over 1,000 trillion in derivatives and garbage. Huge national, corporate, private debts at all-time record, rotting infrastructure, and third world countries being destroyed by the increase in commodities because of currency devaluations. And it's a black hole that we have no hope of paying off because it's a fraud. So A, where do you see this going? B, okay, the banks use the crises to hold everybody hostage and get more and more power. When everything's wrecked, Do they just think some authoritarian system is going to keep them safe from what they've created? Because they're unleashing hell here.
Well, the first thing is because of their hold and because of what they have created and how they've been subsidized by governments and by central banks, they really do believe they can ride it out. I mean, even just recently, we have another $400 billion sort of twist policy, Operation Twist. I call it Operation Great Depression too. But of the Fed basically buying $400 billion of longer term maturities. What are you doing there? You're just sort of like pushing the problem into the future. You're not solving anything. You're not deleveraging these derivatives. You're not saying to banks that they have to really mark their books at where they're at, and if that means they look insolvent, so be it. They need to be destroyed or they need to fail in a proper way. None of that is happening. Because none of that is happening, and because instead there is continued money and bailout funds and debt being thrown at this problem rather than determining a solution from the bottom up for this problem, it will continue to grow. And so what I see, and I wish I didn't, is that there's no opposition to this. Even if banks, the larger banks, were to be allowed to fail, which they are not, it would create a knock-on effect, and then there would have to be some strong decisions from people.
So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
But here's the thing: all of this could still be stopped, and it could have been in 2008. We could have said, you know what, J.P. Morgan Chase, you're not allowed to have Bear Stearns. You know what, Bank of America, who was completely insolvent and was facing all sorts of settlement cases, all sorts of fraud. You can't have Merrill Lynch. All of this should have done. Back then it wasn't. It can still be done now. These banks can be made more transparent and smaller so that we can see what we are dealing with rather than propping it up with money and money and money being printed, with our currency being devalued, with debt being accumulated.
Okay, I understand there's ways to extricate ourselves. The problem is the bankers have put their people in the command positions in the Republican and Democratic parties. The only person that will talk about the elephant in the room is Ron Paul. He gets demonized and attacked. They're clearly not changing course. So where are we going in closing?
So we're going to continue to get worse. I mean, we had a Great Depression that lasted for 7-8 years globally in the 30s, and that's what I'm writing about in my fiction book in Black Tuesday. But it's going to continue now because it's a deeper problem now. There were more derivatives, there were more fraud, there's more money being printed to subsidize it. I think this is going to last longer.
Tell us about Black Tuesday, the new book. This is your first fiction book, but it's also based in reality, kind of a history or near future type book. And I know sometimes a fiction based on reality can get more attention than even, I guess, the last couple of best-selling New York Times best-selling books that you've written that are nonfiction.
Yeah, and I thought that way there could be a human face to it. Actually, someone very kindly suggested the book was my way of putting a human face on Goldberg's The Crash in 1929 book, and that wasn't really my intent. It was a nice compliment. But basically the idea is that, it's about a woman, it's about a family, it's about sort of this oppression of, a struggling working class and a struggling middle class at the time, and how bankers literally, take this entitlement and kind of tell themselves that it's okay, it's just one bad signature here, it's one bad fraudulent deal there, and it grows and grows and grows. And the villain in my book is actually Jack Morgan, who, it's not the exact story of how he did it, but I can imagine certain things probably did happen in a way, is that there were some really fraudulent deals back then that J.P. Morgan Chase, which was then just Morgan Bank, did that really helped cause the 1929 crash and unleash the Great Depression. There were bankers then shorting their own banks while they were using their customers' money to prop up the market to suck in more investors at the last moment before 6 to 8 months later it all fell apart on them in the middle of the Great Depression. So what I'm just showing is the human side of that. I'm following a woman who gets involved, who doesn't want to be a hero, who doesn't set out to be a hero, and is very flawed in very many ways, but who sees it for what it is, and it takes great personal struggle to really bring it to people's attention. And there's a lot of problems, and there's a love triangle and everything else that happens in fiction. But the idea is that one unlikely person might not make a tremendous difference, but when called to the occasion, can step up, and that's really sort of the background, and it takes place in 1929, which is very, very similar to what's going on right now.
Now the book is coming out any second now, right?
Yeah, it's out on Amazon right now, and it's in the iBook store right now. So it is out electronically now. You can get it like right now. And then in terms of stores, hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. So the future is now.
Yes.
So now with digital, it's out in the stores the next few weeks, and the book is Black Tuesday. Nomi Prins, thank you so much for spending time with us, and I look forward to having you back on as we chart what's happening, and hopefully with people like you out there exposing these dastardly creatures, we're going to be able to bring them to justice and reverse the course of this corrupt system before we're all brought to rack and ruin.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes Infowars Nightly News. I'm going to go out there and shoot a video that we're going to post on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com tonight that is a call to action to protest the Federal Reserve itself. The actual, real criminal banksters. Not capitalism's bad and all of Wall Street and 30,000 companies are evil. Now, I had the Dallas Morning News and other publications contact us today, and they're saying, so you're doing a nationwide thing at Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio. No. I am simply putting out the idea that, hey, instead of just going to your financial district and griping at Wall Street, which has a lot of good companies on it that hire Americans and others, why not go to the big 6 mega banks masquerading as the Federal Reserve? They're the ones that actually set all this up that Nomi Prins just covered. How about we actually go after the real problem? It's the Federal Reserve running George Soros and Buffett and others to get more bailout money. They want the austerity. They want to raise taxes, cut your benefits so more money can be paid to them. They're the ones using the European Union to fully destroy all sovereignty in Europe right now, holding them hostage. We just talked to a Goldman Sachs insider agreeing with my analysis. This is happening. So please get the word out to your Facebook, your Twitter, your MySpace, everywhere. Call your friends and family. Tell them that we are going to start out occupying the Dallas Federal Reserve and the sidewalk around it this Friday. I will arrive after the radio show at 6 p.m., and I'll speak for about 2 hours. Then I will get in my RV. I will drive to the Federal Reserve. The big branch for Region 11 is in Dallas, but its sub-reserve, it's an even bigger building, is in Houston and San Antonio. I'll be in Houston high noon on Saturday, and then I'll be 10 a.m. to noon or so with people there at the San Antonio Federal Reserve. Now, no matter where you are, you're a majority of one. Get your friends, your family, your neighbors, go down, demonstrate, call the media, let them know you're going. Go down and demonstrate at your Federal Reserve, especially if you're around one of the big 12 ones or one of their substations. And let them know that you're aware of what they're doing. Now, with the Dallas situation, I've got to do the nightly news. I've got to, as a general here who goes out on the front lines, but I've also got to be here in our command center and try to research all this, get it together. I've got to do the radio show. I've got to do the nightly news. And so what I'm going to do is if people do occupy the Dallas Fed, and if they stay there, and you can stay one day and then others will arrive. We'll be talking about it on air. If they arrive on Sunday with your sleeping bags or whatever. If we keep that thing occupied for a week or so, it will become a big national story. And Sunday, I'm going to go to Dallas Friday. I'm going to turn around and go down to Houston. Then Saturday. Then Sunday, I'll be in San Antonio. Then I'm going to go back to Austin, regroup, do the 2-hour radio show, 4 to 6 p.m. Central. And then if the occupation works, and who knows, it might spring up in San Francisco. It might pop up at the Fed out in Lincoln, Nebraska. It might pop up at the one at Kansas City. It might be the one at St. Louis. It might be the one in Richmond. It might be, okay, wherever it happens, I will either get on a plane or get on our new Infowars RV, and I will drive to that location and broadcast from there. Okay? So I don't expect the place where I go is where this is going to happen. But wherever you're at, be part of history, face down the real tyrants. Don't let the globalists come in with their counter-revolution, their false counter-revolution of communist, and people calling to raise taxes on the middle class and transfer the money to bankers. Don't let them speak for you. The American people aren't just going to occupy Wall Street and attack capitalism. We're going to go after the crony capitalists who are the opposite of capitalists, the opposite of free market, the monopoly men. So the big one to be at, we're going to Houston and San Antonio because we know there's groups down there. We want to point out this is at every Federal Reserve location. But the big one, the one we're going after, and I had this in my gut when I said yesterday on air, I said, should we occupy the Dallas, the San Antonio, or the Houston? And last time I checked, 80+% in the poll. In fact, guys, I know we're at the end of the show, but pull up Infowars.com. Go to the bottom right-hand corner, and there's the poll. Show people the poll over here on the camera, and then click it. It was like 80% this morning when I looked, of 3,000 votes or something total, want us to occupy the Dallas Fed. So, all over the country, I'll go there to kick it off. Then I will race around stirring up other people like Paul Revere, literally in the bus. Yeah, there it is, close to 3,000 votes, and it's 78%. It was like 80 this morning. So close to 3,000 votes, 78% want the Dallas Federal Reserve, Houston branch of Dallas Fed, San Antonio branch of Dallas Fed. You can see that you got 2,314 want Dallas, 473 or 16% want Houston, and H-Town, and for S-Town, great town, by the way, my second favorite city in Texas after Austin. We're going to be down there, and that's only 175 votes want that, or 6%. And we're going to close that poll out soon because I'm going to have Aaron put it in our press release. We need your help. We need your help to get out to all of these events. And we need your help to get our press release, our articles about it, the video I'm going to shoot about it, this video as well. Get it out to everybody, okay? Regardless of what you think, liberal, conservative, black, white, old, young, Hispanic, Asian, turquoise, purple, green, polka dotted. If you want freedom, these are the tyrants. There's no doubting that. Union people, non-union, it doesn't matter. Everybody isn't welcome. Everybody is essential. Everybody is absolutely commanded by liberty and the essential survival of our republic to be there. And of course, everybody is welcome, but that's a side issue. You are commanded by conscience and basic common sense to be there Friday, 6 o'clock, and that's where everybody needs to go. If you're in Houston, you've got to go to work on Saturday or Sunday, or got kids, come out with them to the Houston event. Or if you're in San Antonio or other areas that can't come to the Dallas event, come to San Antonio. But if you can, and you're in any of the states around Texas, no excuse, Friday, 6 o'clock. And if you can't make it then, come the next day. You know, whenever we stormed the Texas Capitol 2 separate times and almost defeated the TSA bill. And notice the resistance now is causing them to start to back off. The White House is talking about abolishing it. There's major heat, there's lawsuits. You will notice that I would go down there for about 2 hours at 4, 5, 6 o'clock. I'd leave. And then even bigger crowds came after and went into the rotunda and took over and shouted them down. That's what's going to happen here. All of you are just as important or more important than I am. I don't want you standing beside me. I want you standing in front of me. You are the leaders. I don't want you just standing behind me or beside me. I want you to stand in front. All of you are leaders. Don't just see yourselves as behind me or beside me. We've got to all stand together or hang separate. You are the leaders. We can beat these people. Their crimes are so outrageous. They're so ridiculous that if we just expose them, and we've got demands, I've covered those demands. We want the Federal Reserve abolished. We want the power of the purse transferred back to Congress. We want U.S. money to be created debt-free under the sovereignty of the nation, not backed up by the taxes of the people. It's just a symbol of commerce, not the fiat creation that gives the globalists control of the whole planet. We want to see the banksters for all their frauds investigated, charged, and convicted, and imprisoned. And I covered all that on the radio. We're going after the New World Order. We want our republic back. We want 1776 worldwide. That's it for Infowars Nightly News. Now the rest is up to you, InfoWarriors. You need to be there and be part of history. We are going to occupy the Federal Reserve in Dallas and hopefully spur a movement that will spark political brush fires all over the United States. We will see you there Friday. And already I'm seeing other groups saying they're going to occupy the Federal Reserve now. And a lot of the Occupy Wall Street folks are going, yeah, it's the Federal Reserve. And Dallas Morning News called me about a Dallas group that's doing it. There's a bunch of exciting things happening. And we're going to do this together. Don't wish later you would have been part of this. Also, you support this alternative media beacon of liberty and freedom when you subscribe to prisonplanet.tv. You can also subscribe at InfoWarsNews.com. All my films, my book, Paul Watson's book, my daily radio/TV show, this nightly news show that so much energy and work goes into, with the incredible reports on the checkpoints, the fluoride, the vaccines. I mean, it's just amazing. The breaking news here, everything we do. All of my films in super high quality, expanded extras, 8.5 years up and running. We're just adding more and more features. You are funding the 2011 version of the Pamphleteers and the Sons of Liberty and the lead up to 1776. You are funding this 21st century version of John Adams, of Samuel Adams, you know, with his beer money financing pamphlets. You are all Samuel Adams today. All of us together, the Info Warriors, are walking in the footsteps of Sam Adams, and all of you that are members are standing right beside us, behind us, and in front of us, encircling all of us together in a hedge of protection and a reawakening of liberty. All right, I'll see you back on the radio tomorrow, 11 a.m., and back here, God willing, 7 o'clock Central, Infowars Nightly News.